Welcome to the One Step Ahead series, part storytelling, part podcast, and entirely a celebration. This project is a way to honor the wise beings and medicines that serve us in creating a life that is aligned with the unique beings we are, and the values that connect us to ourselves, to others, to our precious planet, and energies in the universe. You're invited to share in the intimate conversations that arise when we ponder and explore the questions: what does living in alignment feel like? What does it look like? How do we find our way, and who are the guides that can help us discover and deepen our understanding of ourselves? If you're a curious seeker, if you've known that something about your circumstances is not quite the right fit and wondered, what else is there? This is a place to open, expand, and explore. One step ahead of our past, of where we've been, one step closer to where we want to be, where we're meant to be, finding alignment. Always, still, putting one foot in front of the other. Hello and welcome to the One Step Ahead series. We're just getting rolling with season 3, autumn. Feels so good. I'm really excited to be joined today to get our season rolling. As always, I realize, Eileen, I've started calling you in my head our resident slow living witch.
I love it.
Cyclical living expert and teacher and all things wonderful. We are so grateful to have your contributions again this season to help us set the scene around the energetics of autumn. We're recording this in kind of a curious period where it's autumn, but it's still summer, but the energies are really shifting, and a lot of routines for a lot of folks are getting readjusted again. It's a lot. It's a lot. We thought summer was a busy, hot, fiery energy. I'm excited for you to help us prepare a little bit for what's coming over the next few months, Eileen. So thank you for joining us again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here. I will be your resident witch anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. Sabrina and I were talking recently, actually, around this sense of still holding on and savoring those last warm, longer days. And yet, the same time we have that conversation, I notice, how is it dark already? I haven't taken my pup for her evening walk. And for me, I'm already feeling this sense of kind of going in and needing to nest inside, less focus on how things are outside. And I feel like that really mirrors a lot of what's happening out in Mother Nature as well. I'd love
Yeah.
your thoughts.
Yeah, it's very true. It is this sense of, yes, it's still hot. I know we're having a heat wave here. I think you are as well. That's not always common in September. And we also have leaves turning, and we've got those cooler nights. So it's really hot during the day, but it's cooling down in a way that it doesn't do in the height of summer when it's hot. And we've got those longer nights as well. So there really is this energetic shift happening, and it coincides so beautifully with Virgo season and this like detail oriented routine schedules kind of feeling, and that sense of turning back inwards. Summer is a very outward focused time of year. Energetically, there's a lot going on outside of us, outside of our homes, out in the world, connecting with community, having those big summer late night hullabaloos, what have you. And autumn is really kind of a return to that routine. School starts for us in the Northern Hemisphere, and it is this time of like almost a reset. And all of the energies really match. So in the Celtic calendar, autumn begins at August 1st with Lunasa. So in a lot of ways, the shifting towards the inner turning happens quite early for those of us who are used to our Gregorian calendar. The first day of fall is the autumn equinox, but the reason it's that equinox, that equal, is it's the midpoint of autumn in the Celtic calendar. Much like midsummer, which is the summer solstice, is midsummer, the middle of summer. That's where that word comes from. And I found when I started paying attention to the seasonal shifts a bit more, this kind of shifting all the seasons by a month and a half really resonated for me. And I started to notice that come August 1st, you really do start to notice those nights getting longer. There's darkness, a space for a fire in the evening before 11 p.m. It's gotten dark before then. So it's really lovely to be feeling into those energies as we turn inwards and prepare for the dark half of the year.
Thank you for that reminder about the wheel of the year marking the change of the seasons so much differently. We've talked about this, I know, in the past, that for me, I continue to find comfort when you teach me about these things, because then my brain says, we're in flow with nature. We started to feel this earlier in August, and it's kind of ramping up, whereas the autumn equinox feels like it's late. We should have been doing this 6 weeks ago. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to, already creating my wish list for 2025, is to be even more tuned in to those 8 meaningful points during the year where we get to tune in and really acknowledge and find our ways of relating to the nature that's being all around us. I'm kind of tripping over this, but my point is that just listening to you describe autumn really starting in the Celtic calendar in the beginning of August, my brain says, yes, me too. That makes so much sense. There can be a little bit of a push-pull to try and keep up with the energy of July or that same sort of momentum. And with that, there's a bit of a mismatch. It feels a little bit out of alignment. And so then you saying, well, it kind of is if you're thinking of autumn as September 21st. I think it will be really neat to go through all of those ceremonies with you to really see the thread of all of those ebbs and flows of the energy and the different types of energy that really become more prevalent with those different seasons. Often it seems that it's those unique, special energies that we get to celebrate, both in nature, but also within ourselves and in the lives we're cultivating for ourselves. So I really love when you bring that up in these conversations, because it makes so much sense when we're talking about alignment and feeling into and finding more of that.
And it's interesting because the way that Celtic calendar is divided up, autumn is the season of harvest. We have the first harvest with Lunasa of the grains. The grains are ready for harvest. We have the second harvest of the apples and the squash and all of that kind of stuff at Mabon, or the autumn equinox. And then we have the final harvest at Samhain, which is like those late gourds and things that take longer to ripen. But all through that, there is a sense of kind of turning inward, but it's also still a very busy time. If you think about harvest time, not only do you have to bring the food in from the fields, from the forests, you then also have to be processing it and making it, preserving it so that it gets you through the long months of winter when there is no food readily available. And so while it is a bit of a slowing energetically, it's not slowing in the way that winter slows us. It's more of a refocusing and getting clear on the details, cutting back the things that are spent so that they can fall to the earth and be composted. It's a really good time for revisiting routines, the seeds that you planted back in spring that have now fruited. You get to collect the fruit, and then, is that a plant that is going to continue to grow? Is it a perennial or is it an annual that needs to be cut back and turned into fertile soil for next year's planting? And then what are you putting in the ground to winter, right? Like thinking about bulbs. I'm be planting my garlic soon, for instance, because those bulbs, those seeds and bulbs that we put in the autumn just get to lay dormant underneath that lovely layer of compost that we can lay down over it over the course of winter so they can come spring forth in the spring.
Mm. That's such a sweet metaphor, really, about the importance of rest during this busy time of harvest, where there's this call to slow down a little bit. And with the darker days, it feels like there's a greater opportunity to rest. And I think at this time of year, paying attention to the quality of our rest is
Mhm.
perhaps more important than any other time of year, because we really are called into action and needing to respond in order to prepare and take care of ourselves. And if we don't tend to the quality of our rest, it's going to be a whole lot harder to
Mhm.
accomplish all of the things that are really kind of time bound by nature and by the routines that we have in place to keep everything running. And I hadn't thought about that before. Whereas if we still had that really fiery energy, the need to rest during the heat of the day, it might be a little bit harder to hit the ground running, to sustain that for the period of time that you need to in order to get the day's work done. And then to
Mhm.
soften into, okay, now I'm really ready to rest again.
Yeah. Yeah, this is where our culture really struggles is coming into autumn and winter because it's not, and they are not energies that are held up as worthy or valid in our culture, right? It's this perpetual spring, summer,
Mhm.
plant harvest, and it forgets this, okay, cull, cut back the plants that need to be cut back. If we think again, always in these metaphors, there's lots of plants that need to be cut down the upper branches for the winter to be able to grow the most fruitfully the next year. There is tending and pruning, if you will, that needs to occur. And the same goes for, our inner landscapes and our plans and our dreams are the things that we're putting our intention into. It's a really good time to revisit all of the things that we set in motion in spring and see what is still bearing fruit and see what maybe is no longer working or what needs to be cut back and go dormant over the winter months. And it's a really good time as well. We all will talk about spring cleaning, which is necessary after a winter indoors, but autumn cleaning is very much a thing that a lot of people feel compelled towards. This season is a great time to purge your physical things too. Get them out of the home so that they're not just collecting dust and causing clutter as we naturally end up spending more and more time indoors over the winter months.
Mhm. For people like me, things can tend to pile up over the summer when I'm so much more focused on outside. I love seeing that thread as well that links together from, the fieriness of Cancer season back in July that it lights the fire for me this year, it lit the fire of decluttering. And then
Mhm.
I've been riding that wave as much as I can. And now it's reaching a point of, okay, we've done the big stuff that we can do, and now we really need to make sure that the space is clean, it's clear, it's tidy, so
Mhm.
that any works in progress maybe aren't looming during
Mhm.
the winter. And that seems to line up quite nicely with what you're describing about the culling, the tending, and the pruning of really setting up the environment to prosper after the seasons of rest.
Yeah, and to
And
make it so that you can rest
yes.
during the season of rest.
Yeah. Yeah. Which again, thinking about, I've got this big, beautiful lilac, and every year I think it needs to be pruned. It needs to be pruned. And yet there's part of me that is so delightfully amused by its robustness. And then when winter comes, we don't get a lot of snow here, but when we do, my poor lilac just gets so weighed down with that. And
Mhm.
so now my brain is thinking, well, perhaps it would be a tremendous kindness to offer to our plants instead of keeping all of the things because we like bigger and better. And while I don't consciously think that's why I'm choosing it, I can't help but think that may be why I'm choosing.
Yeah. Yeah, it can feel uncomfortable to prune things back because they've become the familiar, or because they are beautiful, but perhaps, yeah, as like that metaphor with the snow is great. There's some detriment to holding on to all of it because it gets heavy and we can't carry it all. And if we're always in this growth, there needs to be some dying back or some culling or some cultivating in order to be able to continue to carry forward with that growth. We can't perpetually absorb and consume more. There always is that ebb and flow. It's cyclical, right? There's more, and then there's an intentional less.
To make space, right? I need to have space, and it's a practice I'm working on, but clearing what is ready to go in order to make space for the abundance that's on its way. Whereas if there's nowhere for the new beauty in my life to live, well, how am I going to be able to receive it? That pruning things is so tricky for me. This is a little bit of a sidetrack, but I think you might have some really good wisdom to help folks who are like me, in that my heart hurts for the plant, even though I don't actually know when I'm doing pruning. If there's a part that is obviously unwell, then I can easily tend to that. But if it's a matter of trimming to downsize, thinking about my hair or our fingernails, right? These are things we don't just let grow and grow and grow. We can clip them, trim them easily without, taking just a little bit off. Is there a way that folks like me who don't want to hurt the plant who's been working so hard to get so big, how can we switch that to really appreciating that we're serving our plants and serving the things that aren't maybe meant to be?
I think there's a few things here. One, you've already brought to the front, when it does snow and that lilac is weighed down because it has so many branches. That's one piece. The other is that most plants respond to pruning by creating more growth. They actually flourish with some pruning because they've adapted alongside animals that eat them and that break off branches as they walk by in the forest. And the response is usually that from a broken branch, two come. So you get actually more fullness and more abundance there. And then there's another kind of recognition or story. I remember reading this in Braiding Sweetgrass, how sweetgrass cannot flourish without humans harvesting it because it chokes itself out and then dies. And so there is that ability to be in a reciprocal relationship with it. Whenever I go out to prune or to harvest flowers or berries or whatever it is, I'm always asking permission from the plant first and waiting for that permission to be felt. And I'll offer something in return, whether it be some of my hair, if I have tobacco with me, even just my thanks. Sharon Blackie talks about offering a song, your voice, right? We often sit and receive the voices of the plants, the birds, the animals, but how often do we give them our voice back? And so there's lots of different ways to be in reciprocity. And again, that understanding that we are not imposing, we can, many humans do, but we're not necessarily imposing our will and our desire on these plants. We're living in harmony with them. I think I was talking to you and Sabrina on the last episode that we recorded about people who are taking psilocybin and getting these benefits from it. And can we turn that question around and say, how is this benefiting the mushroom? What kind of enjoyment is it getting out of this wild journey it's taking me on?
Thank you. That definitely has helped shift my perspective a couple of different ways. And things that you shared just there. A, the tending to for the what's in the best interest of them. I love that. Really tuning in, as you say, when we harvest, to ask permission and to wait to feel that that is given. I have that conversation when I find a beautiful stone or something in nature, a feather that my heart immediately wants to bring home with me, and I pause and I hold it and I invite it and I feel it. And there are times where I gently place it back right where I found it. There are times where I don't touch it or disturb it at all. I simply admire it and offer it some gratitude. But there are times where there's almost a sense of, yes, being your treasured stone is my next adventure, yes. And I think that I can tune into that a little bit more in conversation with my plants and my shrubs, and listen for them to say, yes, please, we're ready for this now. And honoring that.
Yeah, and we can do the same when we're thinking about pruning our own, inner landscapes or project ideas, or things that we have been working on that are in need of some trimming and pruning. And it can be harder there to listen objectively because our attachment often is even higher. And there is still space if we can get still and question and sit with our really deep truth of finding that, like, okay, this has served, and now it's in its highest service to be set down to become that carpet of leaves that protects and nurtures the new seeds or the new bulbs that are going to grow next year.
I think for people who are so busy, who really genuinely want to do all of the things, that this is a really important point to just pause and let land. Because, like the things that accumulate, or like the sweetgrass that would eventually kill itself by choking on not having enough nutrients and space, if we look at where and how we spend our time, immediately for me, I've been doing this work actually for a little while. I felt this call of, okay, there's too much and I can't keep up, and I really want to do all of these things to the best of my ability, and having to really explore where my priorities have been, what level and texture of attachment I have to those things, because we often, I think, continue to do and do and do because there's comfort in that known quantity of having to do and do and do. And there's often a bit of sacrifice that can be included in choosing to let something go. But you remind us that to take time to sit with it and to really sit with it, to see what comes up, to feel what comes up. And we can mention the noticing as well.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
thoughts arise with these emotions? It's a little bit of an internal journey where we get to anticipate where we want to be going, and to really deeply consider, are the things that I'm spending my time doing now, are they leading me? Are they in alignment with what I hope and dream for my life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's, yeah, as we've said, it is hard because we have attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can detach and create space for letting go, the magic comes through. Yeah.
It does. In that softening, there's so much more room for receptivity and curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Friend, what advice might you have for folks who find this a challenging time of year? There's a lot of talk. I've noticed it primarily on social, but even in the media everywhere, right? It's this back to school, back to routine. In some ways, it feels a little forced and quite abrupt. You know, there were people enjoying beach time, families enjoying beach time on Monday last, and and really milking every last drop of summer out of that with this understanding that everything's going to change tomorrow. It's like, oh my goodness, our poor systems. So
Mm-hmm.
what can we maybe do to help create a little bit of ease around that?
Mm-hmm. I think it comes into a place of creating intentional moments to pause still and be with ourselves.
Mm,
Like, how might you create moments of pause in your day? As people are listening to this, it's too late to like do this in preparation
mhm,
this year with the kids, but even setting up some expectations around how it might feel, right? As we shift. And so if anybody's coming across this series next year before the kids go back to school, sitting with them and tapping into how they feel and how we feel and how everybody feels and what might we feel as this kind of abrupt shift of routine happens. For a lot of people there's relief, I know, in
mm,
that like, oh, okay, we got the structure, we got the routine, the kids aren't in the house all the time, but it is a big transition. So I think it's more important, it's always important, but it's extra important to really make sure that part of that routine is moments of pause. And it's almost a gift of having, like, okay, we've got the ability to craft our routine
mm.
anew, revisit what worked last year, maybe what didn't work, what you would like to integrate, and then craft the routine to serve you and set you up best through this season.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Mhm. And thinking about how you might need, what you might need to do to conserve some of your energy too. Again, you've spoken to this. It can feel like, oh, I don't have that energy. Are there more efficient ways
Mm,
of doing things? And part of this is letting some things go so that you don't have quite so much in your mind. Part of it is setting up structure that supports you and gives you the ability to conserve energy. I think that's a big piece of why people love the back to school feeling of routine,
mhm,
because our brains love routine because you don't have to think about it.
mhm,
The
mhm.
next step is known. And so how can you create a routine that really nourishes and supports you in the way of having space built in, but also in the like, oh, I know what's next. And that in itself is soothing and restorative.
Especially when there are opportunities to co-create that so
Hmm.
that your routine works for you and there's opportunities for it to be, adapted as it might need to be for others. I do remember looking forward to the end of summer and that getting back into routine. And at the same time, I'm really grateful now that I'm not swept up in the fervor of it in the same ways that I
Hmm.
was when I was a student and then a classroom teacher.
Hmm. Hmm.
Many people refer to September as the start of the new year. This is when my new
Yeah.
year starts. And I think that that's kind of neat that we can tie this again back to the wheel of the year because we're we're closer, I believe. Okay, I'm going to ask this and I might sound like I definitely need to learn more. Is Samhain marked as the end of the year in the Celtic calendar, or where does the actual new year begin? I know your new year, you've talked about this, is around Samhain, and that's
Yeah.
really your favorite time of year.
That is the beginning of the Celtic New Year because the begin in the dark and the beginning of the Celtic day is at nightfall. And so
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
new day begins with sleep, with rest. And then we move into into the spring and summer energies. So yeah, like the wheel of the year, the new year is the first day of the new year begins at dusk on the 31st of October.
Thank you.
And this is, energetically though, a lot of people do feel like September, it's 6 months from the astrological new year,
Mhm.
which happens in spring. And so there's a bunch of points in the year that have this energetic shift or boost of energy, or, the spring is like fresh start. That feels like a new year in a lot of ways for people, especially because we've grown up with the new year being like, okay, let's set resolutions and do all the things. And it's a terrible time of the year for that energy to be happening, but that's kind of our association. Just like we feel like, okay, the day has begun, the sun is up, let's do all the things. And we end with this rest period. And for me, one of the most impactful mindset shifts, and I don't always remember to be in this mindset, it's a practice, but is to consider that the day begins at dusk
Mhm.
and that the year begins in the dark.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
The new day begins at dusk has such a different energy around it.
It's so soft.
It's so, so soft. And I think about when we're trying to start a new morning routine. And for me, there can be a lot of blockers around having to get up early, having to start even earlier and put in even more hours before, well, now I'm exhausted. I must be worthy of rest. However, to think
Mm-hmm.
of at dusk and preparing for sleep and all of this is really, okay, I'm starting my day. And when my rest is complete, I'm going to have all of the energy I need to proceed through the next phase of my day. It lands so much differently than I have to get up early if I want a healthy start. Well,
Mm-hmm.
if your healthy start starts at bedtime,
Mm-hmm. It sets this tone too for how important bedtime rituals and routines
mm,
are, and it makes it easier to prioritize those, which, if you are prioritizing them, the quality of your sleep is going to be better and you will wake up more rested with more energy. But the rest has to come first.
yeah. And rest isn't something that we earn the right to be worthy of. Rest is the biology that's required and
Mm-hmm. It's your
to
birthright.
it is absolutely we have our sweet lungs to breathe, we have our heart to keep our little meat suits going, and we have rest to ensure that we can show up day after day after day.
Mhm. And not only show up, but it's a time where our cells regenerate. It's a time where our subconscious comes online to
Mhm.
play and synthesize the learning that we've experienced, integrate it, give us insight. People who can remember their dreams and work with them, there's often so much wisdom to be found, and you don't access that if you're not resting.
Mm. Thank you for that reminder. We do big work when we're resting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We
As much as I
do.
hate the word productive, the hashtag that has been going around for a while, like rest is productive, is I think it's an impactful way to look at it because productivity is so tied up in our
Mm.
cultural psyche and in our like worthiness, our feelings of worthiness. And so if we can get into our brains that it's incredibly productive to be resting,
Mhm.
just not in the output kind of way, it can help.
So, so true. Hmm. Our conversations
Mhm.
are always so thought-provoking. I really, really
Mhm.
treasure that about you and your insights and your wisdom. Are there any last little nuggets you might want to share with our viewers?
Hmm. I think I'll just quickly touch on, because I think we've done this for the other seasons, and I want to make sure that we have some of that
Oh,
consistency. The energetic mirrors to autumn. Yeah. So, autumn in the lunar cycle would be the waning moon. So, moving towards that darkness. That's part of that turning inward, reflective, contemplative practices. If you are in a menstruating body, it is the luteal phase. And for a lot of women who are still cycling, that phase is such a good time to like dot the T's, nope, cross the T's and dot the I's and, get the system sorted. And there is this sense of burst of productivity for a lot of us, which mirrors, I think, that, harvesting and processing of the food, like getting it ready for the rest, for that bleeding time for the menstruation. In terms of the larger life cycles, this is crone, early crone energy. We talk sometimes it's just made in mother crone. Winter is crone slash death energy. So there's like that end piece of winter that leads to rebirth, but crone gets 2 seasons. So she gets the autumn, that kind of wisdom that she's gleaned, that shift from the mother to the crone is like this almost, again, turning inwards. She stops bleeding. She's retaining her power, pulling it back to her, and assessing and evaluating all of the knowledge and wisdom that she's picked up along the way from maiden to mother to now shifting into crone.
Thank you for remembering to share all of those pieces.
My pleasure.
I love this time of year. I get to be excited for all of us who wake up to sweater weather and then put our sundresses back on in the afternoon. This is the magic of autumn.
It's the best, for sure.
Oh, thank you so much, Eileen. As always, I can't imagine this series being anywhere nearly as rich as it is due to celebrating and noting and sharing wisdom around these very real, very palpable energies that sweep through our world and our beings. Every time we have these conversations around the energies of the seasons, it helps me land in it a little bit more sure-footedly with the comfort that everything is exactly as it is meant to be. And the more I can notice and pay attention and tune into the flow and rhythms in nature, the easier it is for me to continue to do all of that beautiful energetic work in my home and in my being and in my rest.
Yeah.
So much gratitude. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers as we are just getting started with the autumn season 3. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, I highly recommend checking those out. And if you have enjoyed being part of our conversation, please press subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We aren't always the most consistent as we release the episodes for each season. And so pressing subscribe will ensure that you are the first to know and don't miss any. I look forward to seeing you all again. I look forward, Eileen, to the next time we get to connect. I love having these opportunities to spend time with you in our worlds. And I'll send you all off with very, very best wishes.
Mm-hmm.